Staff Director of the Duke Office of Postdoctoral Services, and I'd like to thank you very much for coming today. This workshop is co-sponsored by the Office for Faculty Mentoring, so thanks to them. And today's topic is the NIH Pathway to Independence Award, commonly known as the K99, R00, or tenure-track Award. I'd first of all like to thank our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us this morning. We very much appreciate you sharing your advice with our postdocs and grad students. Do we have any grad students here? Or are we all postdocs? Okay. Our panelists are Zachary Cleveland, who is a postdoctoral associate in radiology, Marcella Maria Herrera, postdoctoral associate in medicine nephrology, Joseph McClung, research associate senior in cardiology, and our faculty member, Deborah Silver, assistant professor in molecular genetics and microbiology. So I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves and briefly describe their backgrounds, and then we will start with questions. So a lot of you submitted questions online. Thank you. We'll start with those, and then we'll move to questions from the audience as we progress. So, Zach, would you like to start?
Sure. As you said, I'm Zach Cleveland. I'm kind of proof that you don't have to be on a constant career path to get one of these things. I'm a full-on intellectual mutt. I started off life as a cell biology major, somehow ended up getting my PhD doing chemical physics stuff after I stint as an environmental chemist, and now I do lung imaging, which is such an odd transition. My PhD was actually in NMR, and I do MRI work here, do a combination of clinical and preclinical stuff here in the radiology department.
Hi, I'm Marcela Herrera. I am in 5th year postdoc in the Department of Medicine, Division of Nephrology. I got my master's in biochemistry a long time ago, and then I went for my PhD. I did a 4 years postdoc in cell physiology, and then I moved to look for my second postdoc in whole animal physiology. And I'm originally from Argentina. I've been in this country for almost 12 years, and I'm happy to be here today.
Good morning. I'm Joe McClung. I did my PhD in physiology, and my first postdoc in exercise biochemistry. I then moved into my second postdoc here at Duke in skeletal muscle biology. That was a short postdoc. I did a third postdoc in cardiology, actually in vascular biology, before transitioning here to junior faculty position.
Hi everybody, I'm Debbie Silver. I am an assistant professor here. I've been here for 2 years, so I can share my experiences with transitioning from K99 to the R00 the heart screen. Prior to coming here, I was a postdoc at the NIH GRI in Washington, D.C. And then prior to that, so I worked on genetics and development. Prior to that, I did my PhD in genetics or something. So I'm going to take any questions.
Thank you. So can you describe your experience applying for the K99 or reapplying in the case of those of you who didn't get it the first time around?
I can address both of those. I think the most important advice I can give that I've learned from this is accepted failure is part of writing grants. The first time out the door, I submitted, got a thoroughly mediocre score of 50, which is dead center in the scoring for those of you who know it, and then I addressed the reviewer comments, resubmitted, and got a 10. So just because you get a mediocre score the first time, there is hope.
Yeah, I will agree with that. You have to be convinced that you're not going to get it the first time. It's very, very hard. So be prepared to resubmit, to revise and resubmit. The first time I sent it in, I got in 42. So I thought it was pretty low too. But I, revised it and sent it again, and I got it 14 the second time. So I was right below. Funding was 18 that year, that cycle, I believe. So it was, right there. And the main criticism that I got from mine was the career development plan. I don't know if you understand. And I thought I did a very good job, and this is what I did the first time. I'll be happy to provide copies to you. Yes, I thought this was perfect. I addressed everything they wanted. And then this is what I sent the second time. So I expanded it by about 100%. And I made sure that I use the exact same language that they provide in the guidelines, in the instructions, and I think that's key. And I learned that during revision. So make sure that you pay attention exactly to what they ask. Just tell the reviewers whatever they want to read. That's my advice.
So I'm a bit of an oddball. I funded on the first submission. I was very lucky, but there's a caveat to that. When I came to do my second postdoc, I wrote a K99 in skeletal muscle biology, looking at cachectic muscle wasting. As I was preparing to submit that grant in October, my PI left Duke, and I was unable to submit that K99. So I went through the whole process of writing and getting it prepared, and this was when they were 25-page submissions. So I wrote one and then couldn't submit it. And as frustrating as that was, it was a wonderful learning experience. Of course, no postdoc wants to hear that, but it's true.
Builds character.
Right, it builds character. When I moved over to cardiology, I actually had completely changed my research focus. And that was something that apparently NHLBI loved about my application, was that I had gone from cachectic wasting muscle physiology to skeletal muscle vascular biology in the area of peripheral arterial disease. So it was a completely new area, and my focus in my candidate development phase was I need a full 2 years, even though I'm at the 5th year. This is, it was sort of, the window was closing for me on my eligibility to even apply for the K99 at this point. So I submitted in the fall of that year, and that was my last opportunity, realistically, to submit, unless they were going to give me an allowance for more time. So I submitted, and in this new area, and it was accepted. So I was lucky that way, but I did write two, I should say. I wrote one and then wrote a completely different one.
So I can echo some of what Joe said. I was also funded on the first shot. These awards, you basically, for those of you who don't know, you have to apply within 5 years of your degree. So that's when it was stamped by the university where you got your PhD, which goes by pretty quickly. And so I think a lot of people actually end up applying with just one shot. And if you plan ahead, you can apply with a couple shots, and that's a great way to go. The one thing I will say about that is definitely and I talked to a bunch of program officers about this. Several program officers, when I was in the process of applying, they want to see that you're not just extending your postdoc. So doing more of the same is not going to cut it. This is viewed as a training fellowship, so they want to see that you're actually getting training in a new area. So by that, you want to make sure you have additional, it's really helpful to have additional mentors on there, and to show that you are really focusing in a region or a field that is going to diverge from what your postdoc advisor does. And so that's really going to be extremely helpful. The other thing I did want to mention about success is it is very different at each institute at NIH. Some institutes love this award, and others give out less of them. And you can actually look up the statistics on the NIH website. And so if you're able to gear your application to go to an institute that likes this funding mechanism, then you're going to increase your odds of getting it. And the career development is really, really important. It's 50%. So, and honestly, it feels a little bit kind of like PS. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, you're sort of writing a lot of this fluff. But it's also good because it forces your mentor, your postdoc mentor, and maybe other people you have on your committee to commit in writing that they're going to work with you, and to come up with a plan to see how you can really achieve your goals. So, but it's definitely something not to be blown off.
If I can just echo exactly what you said, between my first submission and my resubmission, I didn't touch the science, a few cosmetic changes. I didn't change the figures. I only changed the career section, went from a 50 to a 10. So it really is important.
Both of my submissions, the one that did end up going in and then the one that funded, in my new position were I was the The one that funded was the last cycle for the 25-page submissions. And if I recall, I had roughly 6 to 7 pages of career development in that 25-page allotment. I mean, it's a large part of it. Very detailed and almost like I was writing a novel. It felt like just sort of my biography and why things were going to be different, why I needed the extra time, shift in focus, so on and so forth.
Right, why you have to justify
Right.
the additional training. I mean, it's a really good, it's actually a nice space to be able to justify what you've achieved and how we can apply this to the new directions you want to go in. I mean, I would get down to it, just to add one more thing. I would put in details. I'm going to meet with this people X number of times a month in person or by phone. Those types of details seem like they really do.
Yeah, so I would like to expand on what Debbie just said. In my case, I put the application to do my second postdoc, and that's how I justified that I needed more training, because if I didn't come to Duke to learn what's done here, I would never become independent. And so whatever your case may be, you can actually make your case if you really do a good job in putting it in paper. So it's a lot of flexibility, but you gotta make a case for yourself. So that was exactly what I did. I said I was going to come to Duke to learn the whole animal physiology, to look, to investigate mechanisms for hypertension, and they gave it to me. And I was right on the 5 years too. So I was just, it was my only chance.
And I'll add one more thing. When I got my score, I was in this. Oftentimes when you and I had done the paper right before they shut that, transitioned over to electronic. I was in a range where, a big range where they were deciding amongst who was going to get funded. And I went to a meeting and I was able to really discuss my research with my program officer. And I don't know if that helped, but I think it does. So I encourage you to think about that as a way to kind of boost your application amongst others.
So would you say that the career development part was weighted equally to your research part?
Yeah, so the word people talk about this is not on the website or anything, but they said that 1/3 of your application is your training plan and the candidate, 1/3 is your mentor, and 1/3 is only the scientific part. So you have to really weigh out those three, because it's not another one. They're not going to go, be very harsh on the scientific part of your research proposal. It's more like, is this a good training vehicle for you to become independent?
My reviewers' comments were, I would say in a large part, focused on the development plan for me as a candidate, not so much on the science. There was a little bit on the science, and of course, I'm sure somewhat commonly they talk about your divergence from your mentor, but a lot of their discussion of my application was on my candidate development plan. I actually, and I would encourage you all to, if you're planning on applying, to contact the people who have funded this award and talk to them about it. I mean, this is a great forum. I actually sent out emails to people who I knew had funded from NHLBI to talk to them about their applications. And one of the best forms of advice I got was that set up my advisement committee like a dissertation committee, was to set up my consultants and my advisors as like a dissertation committee, like when you're doing your PhD, that you're going to meet with them independently, you're going to meet with them on the whole, and they're going to gauge your progress. I know we may be getting a little off topic here, but that.
No.
So you're saying you should do that? You should write that in the proposal?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And if you're switching areas a bit, and it feels like I just got through grad school, I've done this before, but this is what they want. I mean, if you're like, my first round, one of the things I got hammered on is I'm not a biologist, and and so I had to talk about classes I was going to take.
Did you take?
But haven't had a chance yet.
I mean, I heard about some training, some courses that.
Yeah, they were the second round they were very impressed because I'm as a physical chemist, I don't know a lot about lung physiology. Duke does not offer a course in lung physiology, so I looked up, there was some at UNC, that's what I proposed, and they were really impressed by that.
I'll add one more thing to that. I think those are great points. I had a rather massive list of consultants that were going to advise me on my application. I took experts from genetics, cell biology, respiratory biology, human physiology, cardiology, vascular biology. I really reached out in order to set up a training plan that was going to provide me with the most comprehensive levels of expertise sort of across the spectrum for what I was looking at. And I leaned more towards that, maybe indifference, than suggesting I was going to take classes and saying that I was going to meet with each of these people independently and discuss how my project, how they were contributing to it, and I was going to learn from them in each of their individual levels of expertise, and then combine it all, being a physiologist, sort of help, but combine it all into my overall project aim. So,
and if I can just add one thing to that. So when you're putting together outside mentors, I think it's important to think about proximity. So I happened to find mentors who were not at the same institute, and that was actually one of the criticisms that arose, and I argued that this is the best people to advise me, and they were within an hour driving distance. So if you can find somebody who's local, it can be something that they look for, I think.
That's a great point. I should say that everyone that I put in were Duke faculty.
That's funny because that's what I did too, but they asked me to add a comment that actually lives in Georgia and works in Georgia, so you never know what they're going to come out with.
Yeah.
You just do what they say.
Yeah, I got complimented because I had someone who was not, had people who were not at Duke.
Really, so you never know.
There's a level of arbitrariness to this process. That's part of it.
Did you say there was anything unique in your career development plan, or was it kind of what we've been discussing, where you amassed this great list of mentors and talk about the courses you need to take? Yeah, was there anything besides that unique that you had in there?
Yeah, everything. Like, how many times a week are you going to meet with your mentor? How is he going to provide the expertise? How is he going to transfer the knowledge he has onto you, for example? And I have to, I did that the second time. I'm going to meet with my mentor once a week to evaluate the progress, and then I'm going to meet with him once every 2 weeks, and he's going to give me lectures on this and that. And in reality, you might not do that in the future, but that's what they want to do. I'll be happy to give you copies of mine.
We're talking about the career development, but a big part of that is the candidate part of your application too. And I sort of lump all of that into the front end of your application. And I spent a large portion of time, several paragraphs in mine, discussing how I had trained in this basic physiology, and that when I left my first postdoc, I had an opportunity to take a faculty position. I had offers for faculty positions, but I came to the realization that to be a NIH-funded successful scientist, the way that I was hoping to be, that those positions weren't going to allow me to do it, and that I needed more training. So I really harped on where I personally recognized that I had deficits in my science, and that I really needed to work on these. And that's sort of, I think that sort of carried it in. I spent a lot of time on my background, and then how each one of my consultants and mentors was going to contribute to sort of fill in the gaps.
And I would also add, you really want to make this kind of goal-oriented. Where do you see yourself going? And it doesn't mean I want to go to university X or Y, but this is how I want to, as much detail as you can, build my research program. Because they're viewing this, this isn't just a postdoc career, right? So this is being viewed as something that you take with you to go start your research program. And they want to see that you're somebody who's going to become a leader in your field. And so if you can really emphasize how this grant is going to help you just bring unique perspectives to a new field, or really just bring this whole field to a new advancement, and how this training is going to help you. So the other thing I put in was that I was going to get advice on grants, grant writing from my committee. And you also have to have a little section where you discuss what you're going to do in the R00 phase in terms of the training. So once you get your faculty position, how are these people going to contribute to your success?
Yeah, I laid out year by year for the entire, even the pre-year, for 6 years. I laid out the submission year, presumed funding year, second year of training, and then the first 3 years of my independent phase. I laid out exactly what I expected to accomplish in each one of those phases in a table, in both in the table and in text.
In the 12-page format, you won't have time for text. Table.
Tables.
Can each one of you speak a little bit more about the time scales involved? Like, specifically, how much time did you take to do your application start to finish? And 2, can you talk a little bit more about years from your PhD and how that's relevant to your funding?
Years from your PhD. So whatever your PhD, whatever the month and the day that it was granted, they're going to count down from that. And so that means your first application, I think, can go in, and I believe you're allowed to resubmit, but your first application is going. Maybe I'm wrong on that. You have to apply within the 5 years.
But you can resubmit.
Maybe to resubmit, you have to be within that 5 years.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a tight window, and in my case, I had a one-shot deal. So because I think I applied it like 4.5 years.
And you only get one resubmission? Is that
Right. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So what was your? I'm sorry. Your question?
Just how much time did it take you to put it together?
Many months.
So that's going to vary. I mean, I had these ideas about, and I mean, the other thing I do want to mention, the career development is really important, but if the research isn't there, I mean, just forget about it, right? It's because the people who are reviewing it are scientists, and they're used to being on study sections, and they're used to seeing well-written research plans. So I had a lot of ideas festering for a while, and I had a lot of the preliminary data that I was generating that was working towards papers. But I pretty much stopped everything for a month. That's the way I did it, and I just cold turkey. Probably didn't talk to anybody for an entire month, and just wrote. So different things are going to work for different people. But you definitely, I mean, it's like any grant. You really have to commit the time to it because you can't write it at the last minute. It won't come good. I mean, if it does, kudos to you.
I would suggest having your specific aims together at least 2 months in advance, so that you can get the specific aims page written very well, so you can send that out to your collaborators, the people that you want on this mentoring committee, so they can read it and give you feedback. And I would say do that 2 months in advance, which means that you have to have your preliminary data well before the 2 months in advance, because if you don't know what your data are, you can't really write aims that are based on them. So.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. We're all different, and I started 6 months ahead of time, and it really was focusing on the research plan, just because I didn't know any better. Of course, you have to have a very good, specific game page and a very good plan, and of course, in my case, I gave it to everybody. Like I probably sent it to 15, 16 people, before I went on and wrote the complete. The complete portion of the research part. And then when I had all that done, I went online and I started completing all the sections, and I almost wanted to kill myself because I realized how much I had to work on all these other things that turned out to be as important as the research plan. So, but my advice is give your specific aims page to as many people as you can, experts, non-experts, because you never know who's going to criticize your grant. You may have somebody who's not an expert in your area, so you've got to make sure that you can understand what I'm writing, and you have no knowledge of hypertension, for example. So, but we are all different, and I committed a lot of time to this. And the last 2 months all I did was to work on making it.
I spent several months, I would say at least 3 months on it, and I sent my aims out to numerous faculty members in advance, and actually a few of them I managed to get into one room at the same time to run through it chalk talk style, which was very helpful, and they really sort of exposed where some of the holes were. It was very nice to sort of shape it from there, but the last month or so, I disappeared to finish it. And there are so many little things that you don't realize you're going to be waiting on. Letters,
Yeah, that's actually
big, very important. You may even consider drafting your own letters and sending them to the faculty members. I would suggest that.
definitely do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
They expect that.
They don't have to.
Yeah, many of them that you're going to put in as consultants are very busy, just as you are. And a lot of them have a lot of administrative duties, and they don't have a lot of time to write the letters. So I wrote all of my letters and then sent them off to the faculty members for approval and to put them on.
Especially if you're putting an MD on there, I noticed.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. So that's why you actually do have to plan it. So, I mean, I was writing cold turkey for a month before that. I had asked for the letters. You have to give people plenty of time, and I did. I gave them drafts to read. And the other thing I would add to that is I handed out my grant to people 2 weeks before to get feedback, which is if you can have a grant that you're relatively happy with, a draft to hand to people who are in your committee, then it's really going to help getting eyes to look at the grant. And then while those people were looking at that, I focused my attention on the other details, which there's many, the career development plan. So.
I guess the last piece of advice I could do, there's a bunch of these things. You've got, if you're doing humans, you've got to have statements of, I forget what the term is. I didn't, mine was preclinical, so I had the vertebrate animal section. But you've got all these things, and as scientists, you're going to want to focus on science that you're proposing. Do the boring stuff first, because most of the boring stuff is partially out of your control. Making sure that you at least will be able to talk to someone, that you will be able to get IACUC approval. You don't have to have it under the just-in-time mechanism, but the IACUC happens in cycles, so if you can get that put into a cycle, it'll be less horrific when you come around and do that. The Duke Grants office is a giant bureaucratic nightmare, and you've got to get it into them so that they can, no matter how early you get it into them, they're going to get it back to you at the last minute with corrections. But you need to get in first, because otherwise they'll just not look at it. So, and they have strict deadlines and do all that stuff first before you start doing the fun part, because that's at least saves your energy. Because you don't want to be exhausted having written this gigantic document that you're proud of and then have to do all the boring stuff. It's going to be ugly and it's going to be problematic.
I'll throw in one more comment on this, and this was from personal experience. Also recognize your mentor, your primary mentor's style of revision. If he is sort of a last minute kind of person, or he or she, then expect to get their revisions at the last minute. And there are other things you can work on. Don't expect them to work on your timetable. So make sure you get it to them far enough in advance, but you still may not get it till the night before. Keep those things in mind when you're putting your application together.
Parallel waiting is more efficient than serial waiting.
But yeah, I mean, also getting back to the planning part, if you're thinking about applying to it, you want to start thinking about it 6 months beforehand.
Yeah.
And then I think what's really helpful is you're going to find that you can jot down a few specific aims and send them by email to program officers. And that way you can shop around which institute to send this to. And I think that's actually really important. Like I said before, different institutes don't fund this as highly. They don't view this as important. And that's something I learned from just being at NIH and chat with some of these guys. But if you're able to find an institute that really likes it, and sometimes you'll even find a program officer who will talk to you on the phone and say, well, you may want to think, and they're not going to say don't include that name, but sometimes they'll be really forthcoming with suggestions, and they may say, well, you want to think about going in this direction or something, and they're pretty knowledgeable, so the further ahead you plan, the better.
You talked about having a table for like the timeline of what you're going to do. Can you speak a little bit about like how you decide what you're going to do versus for the K99 versus the R00? And I know you said you could speak to the transition between those two phases of the grant.
Let's see. For my timeline, it was, so I had a timeline for the research, a timetable, and I did write this back when it was a longer grant, so I had a 12-page. My research plan was about 12 pages, which you can't do anymore. So I had a chart for how long the research was going to take, and I ended up breaking it down into sub-aims. And so some of the sub-aims were logical for me to do in the transition part. And then I was able to write out more detail in the career development as far as how I was going to further the career development within that period.
I would say that with these things, you really don't want more than 3 aims in this grant because you're going to get killed if they say overambitious. I would say that you want to get one of those aims done, probably the first one in the K99 phase, one of them primarily in the RO phase, and then transition between the two. If you've got one of your aims is the method development, get the method developed in the K99 phase and apply it in the RO phase.
So Debbie, a follow-up question: you're in the R phase now. Have things gone according to plan? I mean, are you?
Exactly.
In terms of the transition, yeah, it actually went pretty smoothly. You do have to reapply. Now, I've never heard of people not getting refunded, but they take this very seriously. And this is actually one huge benefit to getting this thing. It'll help you when you go to look for jobs. It can help you get interviews, but the institute won't allow you to accept the award. NIH won't allow you to accept the award unless you have a supportive environment where you are. And by that, they're looking for lab space and facilities that are going to allow you to be successful. And so what that means is when you go to look for jobs and start negotiating positions, you're not going to be able to accept a position. If you have this award, you're not going to be able to accept a position if you aren't getting what is going to please NIH. And obviously the place that you're looking wants you to bring this award to you because it's coming with indirects, which is actually another thing that is a fine, which I'll just add this as an appendices. The indirects, unlike R01s, the money that you're awarded here, indirects come out of them as well. So does everybody know what I'm talking about with indirects? Meaning you get $249,000 per year. Well, when you start your faculty position, they're going to start pulling out that. That includes indirects that go to the university. So you are not going to get $249,000. You're going to get less than that. You're going to get whatever your indirect rate is at your university. So let's say I was putting all of my budget onto personnel and reagents. Then at Duke, the indirect cost is 57%. So I would only see 43% of the $249,000. There's ways around that. And the major way is buying equipment. So
But you're going to need to do building lab anyway.
So which you can justify for the first year. But anyway, that's sort of a tangential point, but I did want to make that point. But in terms of the transition, you're gonna get help from your grants management office. Actually,
I'm actively looking. I spent the last 2 years, and I always recommend asking for the full 2 years of K phase. But I spent 2 years looking, and have been somewhat geographically limited for personal reasons, but I actually asked for a no-cost extension for a 3rd year of training, and it was granted. But my PO at the time, I had several discussions with him before he left Duke, or before he left NIH, and he actually told me point blank that I, as your PO for this award, will negotiate your contract with your new institution. I have a certain minimum that has to be met. And if you want me to, just once you get to an appropriate institution and you feel like this is the position you want, send them to me and I'll negotiate all your startup and your lab space and everything for you. So that's a nice little benefit of it.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah. But I did have them look, I did discuss by phone with my program officer, what I was, and I actually got, advice on positions. So
yeah,
they want to see you succeed.
So would you say that having the K99 really helped you in your job search? I've heard some people say it's a hindrance, which I don't know if that's sour grapes or...
It's not going to get you a job. You have to get the job. It's a little asterisk next to your name, I think. But there's plenty of people who get interviews without it. You don't have to have it. And everybody thinks, oh God, I have to have this, otherwise I'm not going to get a job. It's not true at all. But it does put a little asterisk next to your name. It helps.
I can speak a little bit to this, being actively on the job market for the last year. It definitely helps, but I have also been interviewed on site by institutions who chose to interview me not necessarily based on what I was doing, but because I had the award, and found out that their interest in me because of the award was that they thought they could offer me less startup because I already had money coming in. And I'm not, everywhere isn't like that, but there are some places that, especially in this economy, that are looking to cut some costs. And, I recently interviewed at one medical center where they interviewed 5 individuals, and 4 of us had K99s all through the same institute, all with the same PO. And the other was a young investigator with an R01. The realities of the economy and the job market are what they are today, and that's something you need to be aware of. But this award certainly helps you move your name to the top of the pile when you're applying for these jobs.
If I can just add one more thing, because I mean, a little bit of this is a crapshoot.
Yes.
Like many grants, and if you end up not getting it, for me, by the time I finished the whole process of writing it, I felt like I had gained so much focus, and it's the sort of thing that you get out of grant writing. So it's going to help you, and it's not a useless exercise, because when you go on the job market, you're going to have such a focused research plan in terms of it's going to already look like a grant, and that's now that I'm on the other side of it, I can say that that's what they're looking for a lot of the time, that you are someone who can get funded.
Marcel and Zach, have you started looking at it, or are you still?
I haven't.
Yeah, I'm shooting out applications now, and hopefully we'll be hearing back at some point.
And did any of you have awards prior to this, like NRSAs?
I did. I had a net 32.
And do you feel like that helped you get?
I think so, because although I applied within my 5th year, that gave me time to show productivity and to get one papers published. So it's a balance. It's a very delicate balance, because you need the time to publish and to show that you grew and that you can do this. But then, you have to do it in 5 years. And so in my case, I ended up having 7 years of postdoc between the 2 postdocs, which, I would think almost 38, and it's kind of difficult to live on a postdoc salary. It's frustrating, actually, because you live on a postdoc salary for until you're almost 40. But it really depends on what you want in life, and we're all different. That I would say made it for me. I waited a little bit, I got papers out the door, that helped me a lot, and yeah, I'm still a postdoc, but I'm doing what I love.
I was unsuccessful at Florida, and 3 attempts at funding in F32 back. That seems like such a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. So I tried very hard to get an RSA, and I was unsuccessful. Then when I came to Duke, I immediately started applying with the intention of applying for Ks. But when I moved over to the clinical division, I moved on to the T32 for cardiology.
I actually had it specifically mentioned on there that it was as a minor criticism that I hadn't had any of graduate or postdoctoral awards by one of the reviewers. But if you have a strong record of productivity, that cancels that out. That you were busy writing papers rather than grants in grad school, and they accept that as an okay thing. So
the first question the PO asked me at NHLBI when I called to talk to him about applying for this award was, how many papers do you have? How many first author papers do you have? How many are you co-author on? I had explained to him that I was unable to get an RSA, so the first thing he wanted to know was, well, what's your productivity? I was lucky enough to sort of be in a lab at Florida where I was sort of unleashed on this new model and was able to publish a lot. And I think that helped a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think having fellowships helps. The other thing that's really nice to include in your career development plan is if your research, like your graduate research, helped to shape your advisors. So that was something I put in as well. Some work I had done during graduate work became the basis for an R01 that my graduate advisor got. So it's showing how your stuff is making an impact. And you know, anything you can do, if you can include fellowships or awards, that certainly helps. But you know, you really want to. It sounds like you really have to just sound like in your day-to-day biography and make yourself sound like you're the best thing.
But you're about to get even better if they give you the money.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. You're on the tip of it.
Is it okay for the hiring institution to give you a smaller startup package because you have K99? I thought in the FOA it specifically says that's not okay.
They can't.
They can't.
They're actually not allowed.
Yeah, they're not allowed to.
But that's an awful hard thing to prove.
Right. I mean, it depends. It doesn't depend on whether they can do it or not. The answer is no, it's not okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to prove.
Yeah.
But they are not, it stipulates that they're not allowed to, and this is where having a program officer. Now, I didn't have a program officer who negotiated with me, but I did get their advice, which is very useful.
And I should also add into that an institution that maybe sort of weaving their way, tiptoeing that line a little bit, may not be somewhere that you really want to go anyway. And so, you know when you go somewhere if it's a good fit or not. For me, it's been several of the places that I've been. You know when you walk in and meet the first couple of people, whether you're a good fit or not. And you can kind of, rotten meat smells. So you can smell it when you go in.
So how often do you talk to your program officers? Like starting from before you apply, like once a week, once a month? Holiday calls?
I mean, okay. So here's the deal with program officers. They say they're there to help you. Some of them just will never answer your emails or your programs. I mean, this is the truth. And my program officer was initially like that, and then I went to this meeting and talked to him, and I still have a relationship with him. I don't talk to him that frequently. I see him at a meeting when I go to a learning conference that I go to every 2 years. When I was transitioning, we exchanged a few emails. But during the process, I would recommend reaching. And he was actually not the one who talked to me on the phone, because he was hard to reach. Some of them just, they're really busy, actually. But I had another program officer who gave me advice when I was thinking about which institute to go.
My PO actually left NIH this past year. We spoke, I believed we spoke somewhat frequently, but I didn't find out he was leaving until the last Friday he was actually physically leaving. So even in that 4 or 5 month window that we didn't talk, he left. So but he was very open to conversations. And I'll say this about the NHLBI is that they actually put on, and I don't know if the other institutes do this, but once a year, once every 2 years, they'll have a K Awardees meeting in Bethesda where you're invited to come and you meet the other K-12 schools and the K01, K08, K99s. They actually set up a K99 group the day before the rest of the K awardees came. And there are people that have transitioned or in the process of transitioning or just gotten their awards, and you're all in the same room together with your program officer and the director and other individuals from NIH. And if you are successful and you fund this and you have an opportunity to do something like that, I would totally endorse it. It's completely worth it. It gives you a chance to meet face-to-face with your PO and with the other directors of the program within your institute. Great networking within the NIH. And you get to talk to the other K awardees, and you never know. I've set up collaborations with people that I met in that room who were their other K awardees. And I would not have met them had it not been for them.
Yeah, I have my program in NIH, and they have an annual meeting that has that meeting, so I happen to go, and I usually try to go to that. It's really, really great for networking.
I didn't communicate with mine until after I got a 50, but she was very responsive. I mean, insanely busy. She said, "Well, let me see when I can put you into the schedule, because I'll block aside a few hours. It'll be about a month and a half." But she called me 8 a.m. the day that she said she was, and has been, has been very responsive via email. So it's been a good. Not that often, every couple months I've exchanged something when it was pertinent, but she's been great. So.
Yeah, mine was really good too. I spoke to him about 5 times within the process, and he was really thoughtful. He will even call me back if I couldn't reach him. So yeah, but it's highly encouraged to communicate with them.
Can I ask Marcelo, did you switch postdocs between your F32 and your K99?
Well, I finished my F32 and then I changed postdocs when I started my K. Yeah, I actually came here with an F32, so for 6 months I was getting paid in my F32. But yeah, that was, I called them and they said, you don't even need to transfer, so I was getting paid by my previous institution while at Duke, waiting for the K9. I never got it on time, so my actual mentor picked up on my salary for 6 months, and now until I got it. But the proposal was written to start the postdoc here, doing something different.
Any other question?
Yeah. So the question is that for the postdoc to find the grant, then you need to be propose something in a different area than the mentor do, right? But how you can manage your time to prepare the preliminary data for your grant while you are working for your mentor? Yeah, so that's my question.
It's a tricky thing. I think you have to. It more comes out of the way you write up your grant. It's that you're presenting it in a way that provides you a clear trajectory away from your advisor. Because clearly you've got to start from the common point of that you're doing research in his or her lab, but you've got to sell yourself such that you're using it as a launching point in a completely new and novel direction.
Yeah, so it takes a little bit of creativity, which takes training too. And so what you end up doing is using the data you have collected while working with your mentor to craft an application that could look like he said, that you go into a different direction in the future. It's tricky.
But you have the facilities to start it there.
Exactly.
So, you said you came here with an F32. So when did you apply for the K award? Before you came here or after? But you have to be at the institution.
You have to be at the institution. I was not physically here yet, but I applied through Duke.
So you don't actually have to be on their payroll?
You have to, but they did all the paperwork for me. So I was on payroll without being paid. There are ways to do this. Yeah. There was paperwork. Yeah.
But so you can be considered an employee, not be getting paid, and apply at a different institution before you start?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. That was when I applied for the first time. For the rest of it, I was 100%.
Just a follow-up to that, I've heard the advice that you really need to have already published in the lab where you're applying for the K phase and have a lot of data would be pretty well established before that. So I was just wondering how you made the case when you weren't quite there yet that you only needed 2 years.
That's actually a good question, and I got criticized by it because one of the reviewers specifically said, well, you have, lack of evidence that you can be productive with your new mentor. Of course, by the time they were revising my application, I had 0 publications with my mentor. And so, but by the time I sent in the second, I already had 2. One was a review that I wrote with him, which is something I will encourage you to do if you are in that position, because you just sit down and write something with him, and the second one was a paper that was in revision, actually, it wasn't even published. So, yeah, that I had to write around that, and I did the best I could.
I didn't have any publications with my new mentor when I wrote mine. I worked my way around that by providing enough. It was such a new area for me, providing enough quantity and quality of preliminary data to show that even in the 4 months that I had already been with that mentor, that I had already generated an enormous amount of material that was in good standing, good science, and that it appeared that I had enough data already for a paper. It just wasn't far enough along to have been submitted yet.
Yeah, can you expand a little bit on more on the R00 transition? So whether it's the training plan or the research plan, if it's ambiguous where you're going to go, and if you have the capacity to do that, how do you fit that in? And especially, did you also decide to stay here, or do you have to say you're going to go somewhere else? And how do you handle it if it's sort of vague where you're going to go?
You don't know where you're going to go.
Well, this is perhaps an advantage of the 12-page format, that you don't have the space to do that, so they don't expect you to.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, you certainly don't explicitly say they will not be working on anything of the aims. And you can have them write that in sentences. They will not work on any of the aims that are in this grant. And they want to see that, the reviewers want to see that you're completely going to be doing, and they're going to look for explicit statements like that. But I mean, getting to your question, I don't think, enough detail to know that you're thinking about what the next step means, but in terms of, you don't know where you're going to be.
Yeah, my situation is a little different because I'm a basic science PhD in a clinical division. And the understanding, even when I came into the postdoc position, was Duke's system with clinical cardiology, basic science PhDs aren't really hired on tenure track. So the understanding kind of going in was that there was not going to even be an opportunity for a position, a tenure track position, which is one of the requirements for the independence phase of this. So good and bad, I kind of already knew going in, I'm definitely going to be somewhere else, I just don't know where. But speaking more to that, I can say that one of the biggest questions that I've gotten in the last year and a half, and I've gotten it everywhere from multiple faculty members, is how is what you're proposing to do different from what your mentor was doing? And where is the clear delineation between your work and their work? And I think both with your application and then when you subsequently go out and look for jobs, that people are going to want to know, is your mentor working in this area? Are they going to be working on the same project? How are you two doing different things? And I think your application, there has to be a clear separation of powers, basically, with what you're intending to do, both in the R00 and how your work in the K is novel from what they're normally doing.
And you can, again with the letter, make sure they say that if you're making a construct or building an apparatus or something, that you will be able to take that with you when you leave.
Now, I only know one person who stayed on as faculty where he did a postdoc, and that was in the very early years of the K99, and he had to argue for it, as I recall, because it was not considered appropriate or whatever by the funding agency.
I think within the institution, if you move to a different division, like for me, if I were to look at a basic science department, my PO sort of suggested that might be an acceptable move in the the same university. But as a whole, get out from under your mentor's hood. Move out on your own. That's always the advice.
And the other thing that I'll add that I put into my career development plan was that I was going to work with my mentors when I was looking for a job.
Yes.
So in terms of they were going to look at my research plan, and I was going to discuss startup packages with them. So these were the sort of details that I think is nice to include in the case studies.
How strict are NIH regarding whether the R00 position is actual tenure track, or is it okay if it's just independent position, even if it's not?
From experience, I can tell you that I found a few positions that I was extremely interested in with good startup, plenty of departmental support. The only catch was they weren't tenure track. And I was told explicitly, if there's no tenure track, it's not an acceptable job. There's no waiving in that rule. And I honestly have, as the year and a half have gone by, I've sort of come to the idea that with a lot of these major medical centers moving to more non-tenure track faculty models, that stipulation becomes somewhat antiquated. But it's a rule, and you have to stick by it. And they're really, the intent is good. They want you to be in an environment where you're completely supported and that you're going to have the opportunity for security. And that's really what they want for you, and that's why the rule was put in place. In today's market, there are several larger medical centers who are sort of moving away from tenure track jobs for PhDs. Particularly, like I said, if you're in a clinical division where they want to tenure track for their clinicians who are serving the hospital and patient. But I was told by 2 different POs that I talked to about this, that that's what they want, tenure track. Tenure track with an appropriate startup, at least low early teaching and administrative duties.
Yeah, you have to actually say that you're going to commit 75% effort, which is a lot. Essentially, 75% of your time is going to be spent working on the research in this grant. And then when you go into your R00, you have to say that. And then there's ways of reducing it if you get another grant.
Part of the issue with the tenure track things, like you said, more or less you're going to lose half the money to indirects, and then if you're paying your own salary, there's nothing left to do research on. I mean, the word is gone. So that's part of the reason they're doing that.
Just a little more about the mentors that you all have, and it seems like if it's a third or so of the applications, does it have to be some huge lab that's trained a lot of postdocs who've gone on to faculty positions, and is that a necessity? Is it possible to get one of these awards in a newer lab with the younger? Yeah.
Yes with an if, no with a but. My primary mentor's first postdoc. He had significant mentoring experience. He came from industry into academia, so he had way more technical training on being a mentor and being a effective leader because he worked for GE Healthcare and as an administrator. So that played in my favor. I think but I also added on a senior, big wig as a co-mentor who had major resources and wrote very nice things about how he was going to let me use them, and that was important.
I think it helps, and there is actually a section in the application in which you have to fill out your mentor's past trainees, how they, where they are right now, what they're doing, and it helps. But I wouldn't necessarily think that if you don't have that, your application won't receive a good score. As I said, we're all different, and we have different experience. In my case, I was blessed by the mentors I had in my past and my actual mentors. So I was really lucky. They trained several people that are now independent.
You can get around that. my current mentor, faculty mentor, who was my postdoc mentor for my application, primarily had trained MD PhDs who moved on to clinical faculty positions. He did not have a lot of PhDs who had moved on. He's a fairly young guy, so I was a little worried about that, but it turned out not to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing you can do is find the most appropriate people, and when you write the letters, which you should draft the letters for them, and then they can supplement it, and they probably will supplement it. If it's not written in such a way that it sounds like, you know, this person is a big name, therefore, you know, there has to be a real justification, and ideally you will have built some sort of prior relationship with them to show that there was a reason that you chose this person in particular. I don't think it hurts you if you're applying from a small lab, and in some ways it can be nice because you are very easily able to show how your research is going to go on a different path. I mean, I think it is harder because, as Marcella said, you have to, the mentor has to write up who their prior trainees were. So, but that's where this is going to be a case-by-case basis. So if for your research, if you are doing something that's so drastically different from what your postdoc advisor is doing, then you definitely want to get people who can help you get that additional training. If you're not, I have friends who successfully got this award with just having one additional mentor. So there isn't a certain magic number that you need, but I definitely recommend having one additional mentor at least. If you don't, it sort of looks like you're just rubber stamping to get more training.
So how long is was the mentor phase? For all of you? 1 year, 2 years?
I requested 2.
I did the same.
I don't think there's a good reason not to.
Yeah, I think I ended up not using the full 2 years. I used about a year and a half. And you can get no-cost extensions if need be. A lot of people, when they, and some institutes are really rigid on they won't let you leave prior to a year. But I also have friends who got this award. They got the award as they were applying for jobs. Then they got the job, and then they had basically 6 months of the K99, and they had to fight tooth and nail that they were able to transition and bring the money with them. So they say that you have to have it as a minimum of a year, but some institutes are really flexible.
Yes, the institutes will let you. NHLBI was several conversations with different POs, and they all said, we want you to at least have a year, but if you leave before the end of the second year, that's acceptable as long as it meets their guidelines.
That's good to know.
So it's not essential for you to finish what you promised in the K99 phase before you move on.
I mean, you need to show progress. So when I wrote my transition, when I reapplied, which, as I said, it is technically a little application, you're going to have to. So every year when you get this award, you're going to write a progress report, which I would take seriously. And then when you reapply, it's a little grant. It's much shorter. For me, it was two or 3 pages, a specific aims page, and then maybe 2 pages of a research plan, showing what I had accomplished and where I plan to transition. So, but they're not. I don't think anyone's saying, "Oh, she said she was going to get 81 done, and she's only gotten through half of it." You know, I don't. It's not going to be like that. But showing progress is certainly important.
Questions?
How did you formulate your research plan when you're doing your postdoc? How do you balance after the PhD you must have some thinking different that you want to move on in your career? Any insurance? Some postdocs work closely with supervision and study projects, and which you has to be like a new major or push you very specific. And it must be very good idea.
Yes, I was very worried about it when I started thinking about applying for the K99 because I didn't have any good idea. And I kept thinking, what can I do, what can I do? And then I came to the realization that you gotta find what you're interested in and then build around that. And in my case, I just woke up one day and came up with the idea. So it was very, very strange, but I guess your mentor plays a big role in that too, because they start letting you thinking independently and doing things your own way, and maybe, design a little paper here and there, and all that helps. But I can give you, advice on exactly how to come up with your own idea, but it's gotta be something that you are really interested in. You gotta find your passion, otherwise it's very difficult. I don't know how it is.
I think, there's two successful things that I've seen, both mine and people's who are kind enough to give me their K awards looking at. If you have a specific problem, one of the guys, he did fetal alcohol syndrome. So he went and learned a new method to study it. He came and did small animal MRI. I'm doing MRI, I'm a methods developer, so I applied it to a specific problem, acute lung injury, preclinical models of acute lung injury. So if you take something, if you develop a tool, then use it on something no one's done before that you think is interesting, or if you've got a problem you think is interesting, find a new tool that lets you look at it in a novel way.
I would say, and I think all of us up here, and a common trait that I've found in the people that I met at the NHLBI meeting and the awardees was that we all had taken what we had learned in our focus, each of our focuses at each stage of our career, each year, and sort of worked it into an area of interest. And you don't go to a PI's lab unless you have an interest in what they're doing. But for me, it was taking my previous 4.5 years of postdoc training and my PhD and what I was interested in there, and working it into a novel area where I needed to learn, say, vascular biology from my current mentor, but I wanted to apply it to problems that I had worked on in the past, that I knew there were there are giant holes in the science. And I think, all of us at the NHLBI meeting kind of came to this conclusion that we had all taken parts of what we had learned along the way and worked it into each of our areas. So for me, logistically, I would come in, work in the lab, and just to get a more direct answer to your question, I would come and work and do the work that I was working on for my PI all day long, writing, researching, doing the lab, the bench work. And then after I put my kids to bed, I had a few hours where I was able to brainstorm. And I constantly, and I'm still doing this, I'm still combining these ideas from all of these different labs that I've been in into this one sort of focus area. And I think that's how I came to my specific application. It was something that my PI was interested in, but he didn't have the background to do it the way that I had been trained to do it in all the other ones. He had the expertise to apply the vascular biology to it, and that's what I was going to gain from him. And in the process, I was providing him what he needed from the person.
And reading a lot helps a lot. To read about other people's work, what them to do. And also keep in mind that you have to build your application around a health problem, because this is going to the NIH. So you gotta, convince them that what you're gonna do is gonna help, I don't know, develop new treatments for diabetes or something like that. So that's important too. But reading, I would say, was what opened my mind the most, because as Joe just said, you are, 10, 11 hours in the lab working on your PI's project. You don't think outside the box many times. So.
Yeah, hopefully you can start to work on something that's slightly independent, and that doesn't always work, depending on how many years you've been into your postdoc. But for me, it was a little different because I realized really early on in my postdoc that I wanted to work on something completely different than what he worked on. So I started working on it, and then it was obvious to me the divergence with my postdoc advisor. But in some cases, it's not going to be obvious. But you certainly want to start brainstorming ideas and mean, one thing I did was I had a whole bunch of ideas about how I was going to, things I could put in my grant, and I had a lab meeting, and people were kind enough to listen to me. Different people will operate differently. Some people like to just think about things and keep it inside. I'm one of those outward brain thinkers. I just think a few ideas and collect and discuss. So, but I mean, this is going to be brainstorming and coming up with ideas and new paths. I would worry less about the divergence from your postdoc advisory, more just coming up with really good science. Although that, you know, that's a critical part. But you're going to have to do that when you have a lab anyway, right? So.
We have time for one or two more questions.
This question with Deborah just when you guys were looking for faculty positions, did you like how did you search the website or ask a mentor to recommend new places to make connections for you, or is what kind of approaches that you have taken for positions?
So yeah, some jobs I applied to, I think, only one or two positions from word of mouth. I mean, some people have different experiences, and I have a friend who got a job entirely through word of mouth. I got cell science major ads delivered by email, and then I applied to appropriate ads that way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, same thing. Major jobs, Chronicle, word of mouth. I have even proactively, from word of mouth, sent application material to institutions that I knew were on the verge of hiring but had not yet offered a position. These people I met at meetings or whatever, even if the position's not posted, just knowing that they're expanding, preemptively sort of sending material out. I think there are easy enough ways to find out if you're active and out and presenting your science, you'll be approached by people. And if you're keeping up with the standard websites, Chronicle, Nature, Science, most positions are being posted in those publications. Nothing happens quickly. Keep that in mind.
Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, we will.
What comment about that? I think you've probably got this, but expect this to be an uphill battle in almost every respect. When you go into and you read the program announcement, there will be directions that contradict other directions. That's what the program officer is for. When you go, they haven't fully adapted their software yet. At least when I submitted to the realities of the 12-page format, you have to upload each of the pieces of the career development separately, but there's a strict 12-page limit. It's going to then give you an potential error, because it is now 16 pages long. You have to know to ignore that error. It's a no cause for alarm. There's a bunch of those. I personally, being the first person in the radiology department to do it, the grants office in the radiology department specifically told my grants manager, do not submit this. The indirect search is small. We don't care. So, and Tawana's great. She submitted it anyway, and once it was in the system, they had to deal with it. So be persistent.
Wow. Any other words of advice?
Looking at other people's grants is really helpful. If you know somebody who has written one in the career development, it's really helpful to get a look at how people shape it. And there's different ways. I think we all have probably different formulas for doing it. And there isn't a formula, really, but including as much detail as you can in career development, and really justifying why you need this additional training. But
yeah, that's exactly what I did to revise my training because I kept reading online and I thought it was perfect. So I started talking to people, and I got 2 or 3 career development plans from other successful K99 applicants, and so I kind of used the things that they used. So that's a very good piece of advice.
And you can use the NIH Reporter online tool to find out who has a K99 project.
I just want to say one thing. If you're really thinking about submitting, then do it. Be fearless about it. Don't hesitate. Don't drag your feet. Just do it, because the aura of it might scare some people off because it's hard to get. But if you never apply, you're never going to find out. You're never going to get it. So just be fearless and apply. Put together a good application. Take your time. Work with your mentor and your consulting groups, and put it in. You never know.
And just to add one thing to that, it'll help you discover if you absolutely, positively detest coming up with ideas and writing grants, then you might want to think about something else, because the reality is this is what I'm doing now all the time. So it's good for that, for both formulating your ideas and also thinking about whether this is the right path for you.
Yeah. And give them what they want. Use the language they want. Yeah,
That's
because
definitely
you may be really good, but they don't know you. So you gotta write down about yourself, about your mentor, about it's gotta be looking good on paper, no matter how good you are.
All right, thank you so much.